Good afternoon, Indiana, and we'll introduce ourselves briefly and ask that you do as well, and then your fine teachers as well.
Hello, I'm Candida Steele, and I'm a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I hear federal government contract cases all across the country.
I'm Fred Ansell. I'm a lawyer with the Justice Department.
I'm Rick Hardy, one of the Hardy Boys, and I am professor and chair of the Political Science Department at Western Illinois University. I teach constitutional law, and I've been involved in this program since 1987. You'll introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, I'm Tara Mojtahid.
Hi, my name is Aisha Manyar.
Spencer Newell.
I'm Christina Lee.
I'm Aditya Shah. We're Unit 4, representing the state of Indiana. Our teacher is Mr. Michael Gordon, and we are ready to testify.
All right. The question for today is, you probably guessed, number 3. All right. For the benefit of the audience. Congress is the only national legislature in the world whose members are elected both separately from the executive branch and entirely from single-member districts. What are the benefits or advantages of this arrangement? What might be the advantages of mingling executive and legislative powers, such as in the British parliamentary system, and the disadvantages? Why has the creation of congressional districts been so controversial throughout American history? You may begin.
Monday, September 17th, 1787. The last day of the Philadelphia Convention. The final issue, the ideal size of congressional districts.
Albert Gerry suggested changing the size of congressional districts from 40 to 30,000. Through the entire 4 months of the convention, Washington did not offer an opinion on any topic except for this one. Madison's notes on Washington's response to this suggestion read,
"The smallness of the proportion of representatives is an insufficient security for the rights and interests of the people."
The convention did not want the legislatures of the single-member districts to choose the president, so the election of the president isn't dependent on Congress. However, they also wanted an educated electorate.
So finally, James Wilson's electoral college system was formed to keep the president less dependent on the legislature.
One major advantage of a Congress separate from the executive is that loyal opposition has allowed Congress to speak on behalf of other populous members. The separation of powers makes sure no branch gets too powerful.
A disadvantage is that it creates gridlock. In 1995, Republican Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich wanted to slow down government spending against Democratic President Clinton's will. A budget could not be created, so the government was temporarily shut down.
But a lack of efficiency can be seen as an advantage, for there is an increase in deliberation. The British government proves this rather well, for with each prime minister, a new congressional branch is tied with it. This parallel in party rule almost rules out the shift in party during the midterm elections in the United States system of government.
Paul Quirk and Sarah Binder argue in Congress and American Democracy that Congress should be active and responsive, yet independent. However, in order to be separate, the legislative branch needs deliberation.
James Madison, in his Virginia plan, initially wanted the president to be elected by Congress. The idea was rejected because people would feel bound to the legislatures who voted them in. Britain uses indirect rule, which is the managing of public policy through the legislative.
the advantage of Madison's Virginia plan and the parliamentary system is the increased efficiency, which leads to less deliberation in passing legislation.
Yale's Bruce Ackerman discusses that the party in power will have full authority, giving their leader too much power as he or she determines when consensus is reached in cabinet, making active disagreement difficult.
An advantage is that it's easier to remove a prime minister than president from office. The people have more power with this system because it's usually the party voting and making legislation.
But there is a difference between public will and the common good. A disadvantage is that the national government is obligated to satisfy the public will, neglecting the common welfare, as seen with the issue over lowering taxes.
Another advantage, however, is seen in the trusteeship theory, where the leaders act in the public interest. This works to justify what seems like too much power in the hands of the executive.
Mingling the two branches can be considered a disadvantage. The American system keeps the branches separate to ensure that the national government doesn't get too strong. However, in the parliamentary system, this mingling gives the government complete control, making the lawmaking process very efficient and ensuring that the government is self-checking.
The creation of congressional districts was born in controversy at the convention, mirrored with slavery and the Three-Fifths Compromise.
And the controversies continued. By 1800, parties were formed and state legislatures were inventing new ways of redistricting so as to secure advantages in the following elections. This controversy became known as gerrymandering.
When gerrymandering passes the pale of legality, malapportionment occurs. Historically in Baker v. Carr in 1962, more recently with in Shaw v. Reno 1992, and currently with the legal immigrant issue in California, we can see this has become a problem.
Madison argues in Federalist 55 that the House helps to ensure that the power doesn't rest in the hands of a single person or group of people. But he also argues that the people are responsible for upholding this, and checks are merely auxiliary precautions. Or as Alexis de Tocqueville says, in America, we get the government we deserve.
All right, we'll begin with the follow-up questions. Thank you. Counselor?
President Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs failure, brought in the head of the CIA and said to him, if this were a parliamentary system, I would have to resign. But this is a presidential system, so you're going to have to resign. What accounts for that difference in the two systems? And which of the two systems do you think handles this issue better?
Well, I would argue Jay Gold, he states that the president is a rock star and kind of more of a figurehead of our nation. And because our nation was set up to be a more deliberative process through the legislative body, in times of war and crisis, we can turn to the executive, who is the commander-in-chief according to Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. And in times of crisis, the president can turn our government into an efficient one and do what he believes is the common good for our nation.
Furthermore, to answer the second part of your question, the system that I think handles this decision better, I believe, is the American system, actually, because in the parliamentary system, as you had stated, the Prime Minister would have been forced to resign. But ultimately, I think that the reason that the American system is different is that the people have more say, and that they have elected this president to do as they want. And I think that ultimately the people in the next election have the obligation to re-elect the president, to elect someone else. So ultimately, I think that just because it's a mistake doesn't mean that the president should ultimately have to resign, but we should leave the decision up to the people, and in the next election they can make that decision.
Do you think that the bitter partisanship in Congress today is partly a consequence of the way congressional districts are drawn?
Can you go ahead?
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Please.
Do you think that the bitter partisanship that we see in Congress today is partly a consequence of the way congressional districts are drawn?
I believe that this is somewhat of a negative effect of this, because historically we can see in a lot of court cases where all the gerrymandering occurs, and different parties use it to their advantage to make sure that they are reelected. This actually shows that the contrast that occurs, such as the court case, there was a court case that the Democratic Party wanted to redistrict, and then the Republican Party was trying to redistrict, and then the Democratic Party felt that this was unconstitutional. And even though that the court didn't rule it's unconstitutional, it was still upheld, and the gridlock and the tension was upheld.
Yeah.